Birds, sing me your rhymes, please, and stones, teach me your time. Birds, sing me your rhymes, please, and stones, teach me your time. Birds, sing me your rhymes, please, and stones, teach me your time. Birds, sing me your rhymes, please, and stones, teach me your time. Earth, cover my limbs now and roll, rifle my skin. Earth, cover my limbs now and roll, rifle my skin. Earth, cover my limbs now and roll, rifle my skin. Earth, cover my limbs now and roll, rifle my skin. Rifle my skin, rifle my skin. Clouds deepen my side. Storms, let me your light. Clouds deepen my side. Storms, let me your light. Earth, cover my limbs. Smoke thrive on my skin. Earth, cover my limbs. Smoke thrive on my skin.
Good evening and welcome everyone to this very particular evening panel discussion on the author rights of trees. And the song that you just heard is a song made by Robert McFarlane and his colleagues while they were in Los Cedros forest. It's described in the book that he wrote and that was published last year, Is This a River? And it's one of the many books that inspired us for the ideas that we bring here tonight. So yeah, we thought it was nice as a kind of setting to hear that song. They said that they could not have created that song without the forest. So they consider the Los Cedros forest in Ecuador as their co-creator. And they're trying to get it legally right with the state of Ecuador, which is by now has already taken 1 year and we have no news. So let's see how that goes. But the song is published online under a Creative Commons license, and all the benefits that they will get from that song will go to the management or the sustainability of the Los Cedros forest. So that's a kind of a small introduction to the evening where we will not only talk about author rights for trees, but also because it sounds good, you know. It's kind of a provocative title, but it's also the author rights for more than human beings. Including fungi, bacteria, all kind of plants, animals. And it's really, it feels like there is a generation of artists who are now collaborating with more than human beings, which also is like one of the reasons to open up the debate and the discussion around these questions. We will not only talk about author rights, but also about rights for nature, because they interweave. So it's difficult to talk about one without the other, and it's interesting to see how they can or cannot relate. But before we go into those details, I propose that we do a little round of who is in my company. So my name is Aelyn Mertens. I'm the initiator of this project. I'm the coordinator of Berg, which is an art collective of humans, trees, and algorithms. And because of the collaboration with trees, we came to this point of organizing a reflection process around these questions. I'll pass the mic to Séve.
Hi, hello. My name is Séverine Dusol. I'm a professor in copyright law. So my expertise is about copyright, property law, but also commons. And I've been also working with artists and with collective of artists for many years. This is how I met Han, and I haven't studied quite profoundly the rights of nature, but in one of the projects I have about rethinking of the notion of property, I also looked at how we could get property relationships to elements of nature, and I'm also working on some sort of ecology of copyright system. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lucia. I'm an artist and a water steward, and I'm also the initiator of Natural Contract Club, which is a process that is supposed to bring us back to the river. And we have designed with a transdisciplinary group a reciprocal protocol to revive the relationship, but also to inspire us to become stewards again of our waters.
And I'm Aelyn Van Diest. I'm a forester and a bioengineer, but with a twist, since I also work holistically with trees. I dowse for trees, and I work mainly around the tree of life, the original tree of life. And I'm here tonight to represent or to be in touch with the fields of the global tree network worldwide. So that's my job tonight.
Yes, that's why we invited you, and we put Aelyn in a separate seat so that the whole field is open around her. That was a joke, but maybe. So to start off with, Lucia and I will present a bit our artwork so that you get a context of where these ideas grew. Because it's also by meeting Lucia that the project got a kind of form, and then by meeting Séverine, it developed, and then with collaborating with Aelyn before in another project, it made sense to, of course, have the voice of trees in the debate. But I think it's nice that you have a kind of an overview or a small overview of the art practice that's present here tonight. So I'll start. Yeah. Yeah. So Berg, as I told you, is the art collective. Oh, it's not the right one. We have two presentations. Yeah, sorry, I got confused.
This is the musical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's this one. And then.
So, yeah, so it's the same starting point. Voilà. Thank you, Jana. Yeah, so as I told you, it's an art collective of humans, trees, and algorithms. And Berg exists since 2019. At the basis of like what inspired Berg in the first place is a whole art practice of Constant. Constant is an organization for arts and media in Brussels that exists since the end of the 90s, and I was part of that collective for 13 years. And the idea is that as artists working with technology, we choose what kind of technologies we work with. And in Constant, we chose consciously for open source software and open source licenses, and a feminist methodology. This means that the work we did, I'm going to talk in the past because by now there's another team and the constants are changing, of course, into new dimensions. But for me, what was important that it's process based, and the process is collective. And in the collective spaces, we apply methodologies of what we call feminism, which means inclusion, looking at what's not there, looking at dominant discourses, documenting, and sharing the knowledge. I had a very technological practice in Constant. And in order to compensate, I used to go, and I still go, twice a week to the Forêt Soigne, Zonjewoud, next to Brussels, to detox. But until 2015, 14, let's say, I couldn't tell an oak from a beech. Yeah, it's horrible. It's a shame. Hello. It's my brother, by the way. So I thought these trees are giving me so much comfort, so much. Every time I would go to the forest, I would come back to myself. I would find grounding, and I couldn't even I would thank them, but I didn't know who I was thanking. So I did a nature guide course, and I did it twice because it was so overwhelming. It's fantastic if you want to learn about nature. And I started actually also working with trees. And when Anaïs Berg started in 2019, it was actually the merging of two types of practices, one with nature and trees and one with technology. And in the beginning, we mainly worked with data about trees, stories and databases. And why I show this is because from the beginning, in the credits, it was the idea to credit not only the humans, but also the trees and the algorithms that would participate, as a way to kind of make clear, like, this is a collaboration. I'm laughing because, then, of course, it became very clear that we had to work with live trees and living beings, and that the previous collaborations were kind of conceptual. So we started working with sensors that we would install in trees, and we did a big project in Arnhem in their central parks, where there is a lot of very old growth trees. And then we did one in nature reserves in Flanders this year. And there, of course, things changed because, then the tree became the kind of artwork. And you see these benches that we installed in front of the trees, and on each bench there was a QR code that you could scan, and then you would get aesthetic interpretations of the data, but also a story from the tree. And the way I tried to communicate with it, I communicated with the tree, with the different trees, was by using Reiki. Reiki is an energy practice using light, called universal energy. It comes from Japan. It was received by a Japanese doctor who was also head of a hospital, and who didn't find solutions for his patients, or not enough solutions to his like. So he did a quest of 3 weeks, and he received Reiki. Since then, Reiki has been expanding around the world, helping a lot of people with cancer, not curing, but at least soothing. And it installs a field of light and love, I would say. So I would use Reiki to communicate with the trees, because once this field is installed, I can sense and I can receive answers, like Aelyn does in a different way. So I would ask permission. I would explain the project. I would explain why I was there. I would ask permission. And then I would also ask their collaboration on the stories, what kind of stories they wanted to share, and how. And then in the end, when the project is finished, I would thank them with a ritual and add rose quartz to the ground. This is to their like roots. This is an initiative by a shaman called Judith van Ginneken, who started this kind of worldwide web of love, installing rose quartz all over the world and like working on the energy field between them. And so, it came to this novel that I wrote in collaboration with a hornbeam in the Forêt de Soigne. It will be published end of March. The launch is 29th of March in Passaporta Bookshop. Finally, after many years, I will come back to that. Just to mention, for the moment, they're still in the 3 nature reserves in Flanders, the Liereman, Kalmthoutse and Bosland. These kind of 3 times, it's called, where you can ask fragments from diaries of trees. They have been monitored for 1 year as well. And so I use the same techniques for an automatic SMS diary. You send a message and you receive fragments twice a day, the rhythm of the tree. And when I was talking about this project to Anyara Rodado, who's a friend of mine, artist in Paris. She's Colombian, but has been living in France for 25 years. She told me, but why don't you do pagamento? Or what's your pagamento? I said, what's pagamento? And so she has been doing work on yucca, on coca, on agave. And through the Misak people, which is an indigenous tribe in Colombia, she learned the concept of pagamento. She said, we in the people here, we go to the forest, we thank the trees and we think that's enough. But that's not enough. It's important to do something back, to pay something back. Pagamento comes from the Spanish pagar, pay. And so we had these long discussions. And then I said, yeah, of course, we have a fee as artists. Why don't we give a fee to the more than human beings with whom we collaborate? And that's how this evening and the whole process of the whole project of Author Rights of Trees came into being. So I'll pass the mic to Lucia.
I have to change. Just a second. Yeah, just waiting a second for connecting.
Juliana.
It was already.
Yeah. Now you have to choose a new computer to mirror. Yes. First time it worked fine. Eh?
Yes.
It's just mirror.
We have been having the whole day some technological problems, and it's quite in the topic of today. But
Yeah, maybe we can have some intermezzo from the three fields in the meantime.
Yes. Yeah, is it working? Okay. Well, I just checked with the field of the global trees, and there is an issue with the pagamiento. It comes from the word pagar, which is to pay, and it's already in our current economical world version. So it's not that that it's most important for the trees but being acknowledged, being heard, being thanked, actually is already very, very important. But from a more female approach of the same concepts,
Reciprocity.
Yeah. Reciprocity. Prosody, thank you. It makes sense to do something if it's in your means to help or to protect or whatever. But this was just a small comment from the field.
Very nice. Thank you so much.
okay. Shall I go? Yeah. So, tonight I will share with you the practice that I have been doing actually for 5 years. But in collaboration with Anne, she brought me again to the question, why did I start this process in first place? Which has been a research that I have been very focused on the rights of nature already for maybe 10 years. And I would say that the starting point of this process was why we are not able to sit as a person and say that we are actually water stewards or guardians of nature. And why is that happening in a European context? Why are we so afraid to say that we are indigenous from a certain territory and that we have the duty of care for that place? So this project with the Zana River, it's a process that started with the idea to collaborate with systems of knowledge that somehow in the vision of creating stewardship are important. That is rights of nature, because it is the place where we can reimagine the law. Ecological grief, because it is the starting point for us to acknowledge the pain of the landscape when we understand what is to lose a tree, to lose a river, to lose a place that is dear to us. But it also questions the love. Why do we feel the loss for something we love? And that is very hard to think in the context of relating to a landscape or a river. So this process actually starts with the Zana River, which will be the focus of tonight. But also in collaboration with Anne, I start revisiting this process through the relationship that I have had for the last 5 years with trees. And I discovered that our process is really rooted in the trees, because this river actually, I think most of you know the Zana River. It's a river that is underneath the city of Brussels. And just to explain, we are doing this project on the river that we acknowledge the whole river from the source to its bifurcation. And this process has been going on for quite some time. But the phases that I would like to stretch the phase 0, because it is before we even start the process, that is meeting the river and deep sensing, learning, experimenting, and asking for consent. So this for us, it's the basis of when you start a relationship with an other than human. And today I will not go through all these phases, but I will just share a bit in relation to what is the topic today. So this river that maybe, I don't know if you have seen this part actually, is in Verde, is one of the most ancient parts of the river. They call it that is the most untouched. But the beginning of this river starts here in this very small forest. The first time I was here, we actually didn't find, we were searching for the source. And we went a couple of times to this region to find the source, so somehow the source was hiding from us. And when we entered this place, 3 deers appeared. And first we were like, did you see a deer? And we were like, no, we didn't see a deer. And for us, it came obviously that these 3 deers were the guardians of the source. And the source was starting from underneath a willow tree. And just to have a feeling that this river that starts here underneath this tree and then goes down the city of Brussels, and where you can only see this river when you open this lid, it makes you feel like, what are we doing to our waters? And that is the reason why, for me, it's so important that we take our place as stewards of water, because the waters are calling us to support their existence and open halls, but not sewer halls. And so in our process, just that you understand, our aim is to write a law. So for us, the process has been a question of what does the law does, and does the river wants to have rights. So for us to understand this river, it was always very important to focus on knowing who the river is. So this deep sensing where we can open our senses, the conversational circles where we can share our memories of water. And just that you understand, the process has been going on we are growing an alliance of care, and that alliance of care is composed by the different people of the organizations that are taking care of the river, from Bruxelles Environment to Natuurpunt, Contract Rivière, and I shouldn't forget, from Brussels. No, I will come later. It's 4 of them. And they have been coming to our walks, and they have been sharing their water memories, but nobody knows who is who. Nobody knows by their profession, so we all know each other by their relationships with the Zana River and how the water memories are connecting us. And so this is a way for us to map who the river is and how we can revive the relationship with the river. And for us, being with the river has been always, the trees have been always a point of departure. So every time we start this walking with, we always start by a tree. And we didn't realize this in the beginning, but we always, where do we start? Sometimes we were in the middle of Brussels, but still we were going, a tree was attracting us. And now revisiting the process and the collaboration with Anne, I start really realizing that the trees were there all along, rooting us, like really guiding us and supporting the process to become the stewards of the Zana, knowing that the Zana is growing from underneath a tree, a white willow. That's the first tree, the mother tree of the Zana. So just that you understand, we walk in many different places in between industry and more wild places in the city, but also places where you cannot reach the trees under weather conditions, storms, and sometimes ending up completely super wet. But something that has been always very striking is that people stay for the 5 hours that we walk, and even in the wet conditions, it's like we are becoming these bodies of water. So the storytelling, it's for us a way of becoming the stewards, because most of the time people are afraid to say, I am an activist, or I am a river guardian, or I take this position of stewardship. So for us, a way in which we could enter more gently in the hearts of the people, for them to first understand the love that they have for the water, was to tell your story, so you are the guardian of those stories. So when you tell the story of a landscape that you have lost, you become the guardian of that landscape, because the memory of the landscape lives in your body. So for us, that's a way in which you somehow keep the memory of that landscape alive. And so the trees, again, they have been always the guardians of our story sharing, but also our grief. And we always go to the same place. So in this place, we have done many grief circles, many water memory sharings. So the trees have become somehow our support, without us realizing how much they were grounding us in that space and being our allies. And the different forests also, because here you see that it's a place we were hosting a grief circle in a very new young forest, which it felt already like strange by itself to be there. And I will go a bit, yes. So then it comes to the end, because this is where we are now. It is the writing of this living law. It is the idea that the preamble is a co-creative story with the river. And in that sense, everything that we have learned is informing us to become guardians. Because in our process, we actually see the beings as the guardians, and we are learning from them, not that we are the guardians of those beings. So here it's also another way of relating to who is there and who is informing our knowledge, and how we think of forms of governance for a certain landscape, that sometimes we humans think that we know how to govern the landscape, but if you ask this type of beings that are very loose in the earth, they are governing the landscape. So what can we learn from them to apply in our thinking of guardianship? And this living law, we shared now the first draft in September, and it is a research that has been an adventure, because our lawyer says if you bring the law with the principles that you imagine the law to have, it will never get passed. And maybe later you will explain more about reasons why law can fail. So for us, the law, it's in the end, we would like to bring it to the parliament, and that's what we're going to aim for. But we have decided very recently that we would like to write this law with the principles that we believe that the river has told us, through us becoming its guardians. And that is an attempt to recognize the river as a living entity. And it's an attempt to co-write with the river and its kins. It is a gesture of remembering and renewal of our relationship with the river. It is our deep sensing. It is the moving of the waters through embodied ceremonies. It is the stories of our lost landscapes. It is the stories of water. It is the custodian agreement. And it is the legitimate proof of our love for the river. And that's how we would like to imagine this law, that our love for the river is present. Yes, and I will finish for now, and I will give the word. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Do we want an intermezzo or?
No.
Oh.
Everything is agreed upon.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any practical or clarification questions from the audience on this? If not, we continue, but just to make sure that, yeah, it's fine, all fine. So Yeah, we have to put back the other presentation. A little technical maneuver. Well, it will happen. With Diana, it will all be fine. Dus nu is het fragment.
Yes. I will just make the charts for short. This is
So yeah, this second, like let's say that was a kind of context for this evening, and now the proposal is that each one of us has prepared a few fragments, text fragments that will launch a few ideas, and then the discussion can start. So. I start as a kind of the initiator of this reflection project. So in 1972, Christopher Stone wrote this paper. By now it's a book that came out, I think, in 2004. But the paper was quite something, because he asked the question, should trees have standing? And the fragment I chose is each time there is a movement to confer rights onto something new, onto some new entity, each time the proposal is bound to sound odd or frightening or laughable. This is partly because until the rightless thing receives its rights, we cannot see it as anything but a thing for the use of us, those who are holding rights at the time. And why did I choose this fragment? Because from the moment that I started organizing walks with trees, like to meet trees, that was in end of 2015, we got insults in the center of Brussels, out of the blue. People coming by and insulting us. Like it was very strong in terms of, yeah, for me it was a big surprise. See? Agreed upon. And then after that, I tried to merge these two worlds of technology and people hugging trees, I'll name it, or people believing that trees are living beings that you can relate to. I try to bridge those two worlds, and I have a series of experiences of discomfort. Discomfort from both sides. People using technology and very used to technology, being super uncomfortable being next to trees and having to relate to trees, and vice versa. People who are interested in the spiritual side of nature and they hate technology. But that's not the point for tonight. The thing is that true, huh? The thing is that what happened is that these situations of discomfort towards being with the tree made me feel very uncomfortable and very careful of my own storytelling. And for years, I would only talk about it to people I knew they would understand what I was saying. And so I think that's also this kind of odd or frightening or laughable thing. And then the second fragment I chose is from Ursula Le Guin. It's part of the book composed by Anna Zing in Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet. One way to stop seeing trees or rivers or hills only as natural resource is to class them as fellow beings, kinfolk. I guess I'm trying to subjectify the universe, because look where objectifying has gotten us. To subjectify is not necessarily to co-opt, colonize, exploit, Rather, it may involve a great reach outward of the mind and imagination. And yeah, I think this is the practice we're doing now. Or we have been doing, being artists, but also being a creative lawyer and being a creative forester. It's trusting the intuition, trusting the imagination. And therefore, I'm very, very grateful to be here tonight. I'm very grateful to Kunsthal to receive us. I'm very grateful to Nadine, Luz is there recording, to support this project. I'm very grateful to all of you to be here and to take the place and to speak. Because we also got funding from the Vlaamse Overheid Kunsten. And with all that, I think times are changing. And it's wonderful to be able to test the thoughts, talk about it, discuss it, and maybe go to Parliament one day. So then, yeah, you have a mic.
I just checked in briefly because I can also feel from the field of the trees that the time is right to speak out, because I also recognize hiding, and I can also testify that a lot of forest guards do not speak about their relationship, their more personal relationship with trees in public. But when you have a private talk, then more people than you can imagine do join in and tell you examples of their personal experiences. So, but the trees do agree that it's the right time to start speaking out.
You want to?
Sorry, I'm a little bit uncomfortably sit before the screen, so it's good that I printed the text out. So, suddenly, without a word of warning, Juliana pulled over, got out of the car and disappeared into the dark forest. A minute or so later, Cosmos and Merlin heard the telltale "woohoo!" and they found Juliana 50 yards into the forest, flat on the ground, her head torch beam focused on a colony of avatar blue mushrooms. Stephanophus azureus, or something like that. I have literally no idea how she knew where they were there, Cosmos said. They're only above ground for a couple of days. It was dark. They were deep in the forest, totally invisible from the road. How the fuck did she find them? I didn't see the mushrooms exactly, says Juliana when I ask her about it. I heard them. If you know how to listen, fungi just tell you where they are. She shrugs. I'll get this feeling that there is fungus around. I know that there's somebody who wants to see me. You get a call out from them. I can say very definitely that it's a communication, a two-way interaction. The fungi know I'm there as well as the reverse. Fungi have a different vibration to plants and animals. The colors move differently, I find. And fungi have a shine that's different to the shine of plants. It's more opaque, and they have a very different energy than plants, much more of a watery or liquid feel. I feel I can relate to this fragment because, since childhood, all trees and certain places attracted me in a way that others could not understand. And I spent my life trying to understand what it was. In 2020, I published a modest book about my insights, the forgotten ecosystems of trees, just about the non-physical effects trees have on us. During my journey, I discovered the original Eurasian tree of life, the Taxus baccati, or the yew tree. And as we have lost its original name in Belgium and the Netherlands, I prefer to call it the Ea tree in reference to the oldest known name for this species in a culture that, without any doubt, still followed the tradition of the tree of life. In 2023, a burnout put me on hold. It was caused by long COVID, but perhaps it was more because I was not fulfilling my true mission in this moment in my life, being an ambassador of the land of Ea. And in this land, the mere presence of Ea, mainly old Ea trees, facilitate our connection with our true selves and with all other conscious beings. But the physical presence in our physical reality does it, but also in our consciousness, because the story Ea has to tell us about our forgotten history is very touching. It's her story of our past. And once you know it, it can enable us to know we have a choice, which type of worldview we want to believe and act upon this. So from this, other types of relationships can arise, both between humans and between humans and non-humans. For me, working with the dowsing rods was for years something I found very difficult. But in the quietness of my sick relief, someone showed me how, and once I got it, I never stopped. And the information that before I could grasp on some occasions now flows in a steady way. So for me, it's an important question to ask: how many senses do people have? We are taught that people have 5 senses: taste, touch, sight, the hearing, and smell. But I feel so many other senses growing and awakening, and I do believe we all have them. So in some ancient mystery schools, they even claim that people might have 350 senses. So hold your horses. So, and this year I started also to train people to awake the senses, and when you do it, you really see magical things happen. So it's really lovely to do. Voilà. I think I might conclude with this.
Okay, so I will not start with the quote, the fragment. I will come to it in a moment. But Anne started with this fragment from Stone. Does do tree have legal standing? Which is, in fact, indeed, that is a very important article that was published in a very famous law review in the US in the 70s. So it was a long time ago, and it's really the revolutionary article that asks the question whether you can ascribe rights to an element of nature. And so it was a bit dormant for many years. And so 15 years ago, I would say, some people started to rediscover this article, and there were some projects around the world to give some rights or some personhood to elements of nature. It was not really trees at the beginning. Mostly it was rivers, and it was mostly in the global south. So there was a court case and then a law in New Zealand that actually gave some personality rights to a river and to the ecosystems around the river, and make the community of Maori people living in that region being part of that ecosystem of the river. There was also another law in Colombia that gave also some rights to a river, the Atrato River, and it spread in other countries, mostly in the global south, in India, in other countries in South America. But in the last year, there have been a lot of projects also here in Europe, but also in North America, to try to give rights to rivers, mostly again, like the Loire, the Parlement de la Loire. That is a project that you might have heard of, that has received some media attention, also because it really follows the work of Bruno Latour. And we can come back to it if you wish, that Bruno Latour really wanted to it's not really my notes, I'm just improvising. I'll come back to my notes, otherwise I will be too long. But Bruno Latour was really, he had first published this very important book, Why We've Never Been Modern. I don't know if it's the English title. It's Pourquoi n'avons-nous jamais été modernes, which is a book that is actually trying to challenge the division that modernity brought to us, the division between nature and culture. So between what is nature, that is considered as an object, and what is culture, that is our society, our laws, our economy, and in which we are the actors and in which we are the subjects. So this divide has also structured the law and the legal system for a long time. And Bruno Latour had all this thinking. He had a lot of thinking. He had a lot of thoughts, etc. But from that book, he also talk about the parliament of things, saying that actually things and nature should have a seat in a parliament, discussing with us humans, legal subject, about the state of nature, about the project of nature. So that was a starting point in France, and a lot of people took over and tried to really also fight for the Loire. Mostly, I think it's the project that is going on in France. So you see that it's mostly rivers. In the first article of Stone, it was about trees, but it was also related to the rivers, because this first article was about pollution in a river in the US. And actually, it just studied the court case that was brought to hold liable the polluters, so the industry that has polluted the rivers and has also prejudiced the trees. And actually, his point was a very classical point. When you are a lawyer, you look at the law and you see how the law fails. And he says, actually, the law doesn't give a responsibility system or an accountability system in that situation, because the trees are really far down the river. So the pollution is at the beginning of the river, and then, the pollution is felt down. And actually, there is a link that is broken between the fault, thought, that caused the pollution and the damage that the tree suffered. And he said, and nobody will actually care for the tree, and nobody will stand for the tree in court. So maybe it's better that we give legal standing to the tree so they can defend themselves. So that was the point. So it was, again, about the river and the pollution. And all the other cases in Colombia, in New Zealand, in India, were about pollution, about how do you defend a river, an ecosystem, against pollution, and do you trust enough human beings for fighting that pollution against the extractor, the company that for extractive purpose pollute the river, pollute the ecosystems? Or do you have to give direct action to this ecosystem? So the legal system they were designed to answer the question are really different from one country to the other. If you wish, I can come back to it if you have questions. But my point would be, and then I come back to my notes. So the points. So despite these different legal forms, actually all those projects, I think, share the same objective and strategy. that is trying to subtract the nature as a passive object and an object that is offered to the extractive industry appetites, into the economy, the capitalist economy that sees it as an object from which you can cut wood, you can take metal, you can pollute, etc. So you want to subtract this passive object of nature to give it some agency. And one of the way that law has to give agency to something, usually it's someone, it's the personification. So you make it into a person. Because in law, we have this division that started with what we call the modernity in law, so the modern system of law coming from the liberal thinking, etc., from Locke and others philosophers, actually divides the entities in law into the subjects that are the bearer of rights and the objects that are actually the object of those rights, or the forces, or the material, the commodity that you can sell, that you can agree to transact, etc., etc. And actually, so the legal person, the personhood normally it's for humans, for persons. There have been some extension to companies, for instance, to societies that are given by some sort of fiction, some legal personhood. So they are considered as a person, not in flesh and blood, but just in legal existence. And so the idea of the rights in nature would be to extend that fiction, or to create a new fiction, to give this legal personhood to those trees, to those rivers, to mountains, to other things, and to give them rights, maybe not obligation, which is a bit strange, because usually when you are when you are a person, you have rights and you have obligations. But in most of this literature, considering rights of nature, there are not a lot of obligations. It's mostly rights. So the purpose is mostly protective, but it's also, when you read carefully, it's also to facilitate transaction, to give a voice to those elements, to those rivers, to maybe try to facilitate the consent of that river. So it's not always protective. Sometimes you can see that it's also sometimes to do as if, not as if, but to give some voice to the river, for instance, because then you can say, okay, we asked the river, and this is what the river agreed. So maybe the river hasn't agreed to everything we want to do with it, but it has agreed to something. So this way, it's also, and it's very important to see that actually in the systems where it had been organized, like in Colombia, this is a very ambiguous, not ambiguous, but it is a very complex situation, because when you associate the community of people living in that ecosystem, living near the river, we could think that, and sometimes you can read very naive accounts of what those people would defend, because they are indigenous people, so they are with nature, so they are the river, so they will defend the river. But for those persons, the river is also a mode of living. But the industry extracting things from the river is also a company that pays their salary. So they are in a very ambiguous situation, and asking them to asking to bring the river at the table of negotiations, in a way, it's also a way to discourage those people from taking decisions that might be not easy to take. But I might come back to that. So actually, this personification of nature allows, to some extent, the law to internalize non-human entities and some sort of quasi-actors as artifacts. And what we tend to forget is that when we say persons, we don't say people. So persons are not people. You can have legal person, you can have non-human or more than human persons who are not people. And this is indeed a legal fiction. This is something that the law can do to some extent, because the law can be a performance. It can be performative, it can be imaginative to some extent. So we are speculating here, they are not so easy to put in the law those type of legal instrument and legal exercise. But when we started talking about this, so actually Anne came to me and said, I want a specific tree, to be a co-author of what I wrote. Is it possible? Because I've been told it's not. And so I had to tell her, as a lawyer, no, it's not possible. Law would not allow that. But let's do it. It's not because the law doesn't allow that we cannot just imagine that it would be possible. Thank you for approval. And we can try together to make it not work, because it's not a question of working, but try to imagine it or to speculate it. But here I think that the giving copyright or author's right or authorship to trees is a complete different process to give rights in nature, as we have seen it in Colombia, in other countries, to give rights to river. Because, and I will try to make a quick comparison, but when you give rights to rivers, to trees, to mountains, the main purpose would be to protect them against what we as humans do to them. So it's the protection of their interest, and the interest that you presume. You don't know exactly what are the interests really, but it's the interest that you presume, and you give them a seat at the table, a voice, and you transform them from object to subjects, to legal subject. But actually their speech or their voice will be delegated to representatives, and I will come to that in a moment. But on the contrary, if you want to recognize that tree can be a creator, can be an author, this is completely different, because it's not to protect it's to protect their interests, but it's not to preserve them in any way. It's just to recognize their agency, a different sort of agency, an agency to create, to be an autonomous and thinking being entity. And actually, you, legally speaking, you transform them into subject also, but into subject that have property rights. So you make them into owners, because copyright is a property right. So actually here, it's not that you give them a voice to express their interest. You take their voice, because the speech is the creation that they contributed to. And so their speech is what needs protection. So it's completely different process, I think. It's more complicated, not more complicated, but it's different. And so actually you associate them with human authors in a property regime, which is a bit different from the other case. What is common is the notion of agency, even though it takes different forms. So you recognize those trees as having some agency, as not just being passive or living entities, but passive in a way. And you recognize also a relation between us and between nature. So integrate them into a system, an ecosystem, a creative system. So this is why I'm so interested in your practices, because I think that it shows actually how it is going on. And the law might be seen as something that would be a bit external to that, that will not be a living practice. It's very rare that law is a living practice, and this is what I'm interested to. So actually, I might still have a critique, so I'm not completely convinced. I'm not even totally convinced by the rights in nature movement, even though it's really, really important. Or maybe I will go to the quote now, and then I will say the critique. So, but I cannot read because my glasses are not good. Okay, so I will read it. So this is a quote from a book that has been published last year that I haven't read yet, I would say, but actually this is the quote in the introduction that is available, and it's from Joanna Gibson, who is a professor at Queen Mary in London. A copyright law professor, as I am, and she is writing a series of 3 books, and this is the second one, and she is developing ethology of intellectual property, trying to cross animal rights and intellectual property law, and she's studying patent law, copyright law, etc. And I've read a few articles by her that are really interesting. So this is actually the only, because it's one of the only person with thinking about intellectual property rights and copyright for animals, but he doesn't talk about tree, I don't think so, but about animals. So non-humans living entities. So she said that only humans can create is a conceit which is truly anthropomorphic, a fabulation. Indeed, an anthropofabulation. It is in this context that the concept of res familiaris is in play. This is not simply a communal property, but rather it is a matter of overlapping territories and layered interests. Through play, there is a sociable making together, a familiar production of the swarm rather than the university of the collective. Marking res familiaris is thus a matter not of boundaries, but of attribution, of sense, and of relations. In an ethological jurisprudence of authorship, the value is not in the originality, in the object as such. It is to be found in the relations, in the action of tracing those relations, and in the originality of those connections. So I will leave it there for the moment because she's saying we know that authorship, so attributing copyright to persons is already a legal fiction. It's a fabulation. It's a construction. It's not a natural thing to do. So why can we not do it with animals? And she's trying to say that actually, if we do that with animal, it would be good to completely disrupt what we think of authorship and of originality. So I will leave that on the side because I will come back to it in a moment. I would have two critiques about the rights of nature. And I know that for the moment, the rights in nature are really, really a media thing. A lot of people find it completely fabulous, etc. And at the beginning, I was also very seduced by the idea, but the more I look into it, and the less convinced I am for many reasons. I will just say two reasons. The first one is that the problem with when law think of persons, they actually think of person as people who can communicate, people who can act, in a way. And we know that when we think so, it's good to give rights, but the exercise of rights is another question. And those persons are not people. So the trees, the river, they cannot file lawsuits, they cannot exercise subjective rights. And the law is actually not very well equipped to communicate with non-humans. So I don't say it's not possible, but the law will have to put in place systems of representation, of trustee or guardians for those non-human elements. And so there will be people who will speak on behalf of nature. And of course, you might say to me, this is because I'm a Western lawyer and also a Western human being. And so I think that nature is mute. Okay, we have muted it for most part, but you can think, okay, the non-humans are mute and so they can't speak. And I know that in other territories, in other cosmologies, actually the nature is not mute at all. So this is another question. But let's say that for law, at least, the law as we know it in Western world, those elements cannot exercise their rights. So it's not only a legal issue, actually, it's also a political one, because how can we speak on behalf of a tree, a river? And who is the we that could speak, who can speak for that? And actually, the examples that have been operating right now in New Zealand and in Colombia, they have put in place different system of representation, and it doesn't work very well, actually, because it's very complicated to organize and decide who will speak for the river and with which legitimacy. So this is a very complex legal and political question. And this is what a colleague of mine has called an issue of ventriloquism, because you speak for something else. And can I still have a few minutes? I don't know how much time I take. Yeah, okay. And actually, and the thing is also that when you give personality to nature, you actually makes it more malleable, more responsive to the needs of humans. Because of that system of ventriloquism and representation, you open the possibility for the representatives to actually represent themselves or represent what they think the tree, the river might think or might want. And in a way, I think that nature bears the risk of being alienated from the very moment as it is recognized as a legal person. Because when you give it right, you also put it into a system of representation, and actually you detach the tree from itself, in a way. So I fear that there is not perfect legal form. And there is also a risk of new form of subjugation, because if you organize it within the modern system of law, actually you don't have a lot of legal figures that might help. So the tree or the river will not be an object, it will be kind of subject, but it will be a subject that is actually actioned by other subjects, humans. And so how do you avoid, again, that the tree, that the river will be subjugated to the needs or the interest of the human being? So you have to put in place some protection against that. And actually, I would like here to quote Marilyn Stratton, who is an anthropologist, a very important anthropologist. And Marilyn Stratton has an interesting article, a notion of cutting the network, because she thinks that once you give rights to something, you cut a network, because you take that thing or that person out of a system, a milieu, a network, and you make it into a thing. And actually you make some sort of separation. And I think this is something that I would like to keep in mind when ascribing personality or rights to non-humans and to nature. And that leads me to my second critique, is the fact that when you grant rights to nature, you actually take it within a system of rights that is based on very modern ideas of divide between nature and culture, and an idea of possessive individualism. All of systems of Western property, personhood, etc., is a system that is based on liberal ideas of the 17th and 18th century, that is grounded in individualistic approaches of our place in society, which has been right in those times, in those periods where those individual rights needed to be protected and promoted. But today we might be at a very different stage and very different systems of society, that where this individualism and this possessive individualism might also be part of the issue, with the extraction, with the damage to nature that actually comes from that very systems. And it's the same with copyright, because copyright is also a systems where authorship, the recognition that one person is a creator, and because she or he is the creator, they can have rights in what they create, is also a system that actually subtracts the creation from the society to give it to one individual that has a control of it, and that also can control the meaning of the culture. And this is a system, of course, I work in copyright and I like copyright. At the same time, I'm very wary of how copyright is conceiving creation and culture. And I think that we need to be very careful if we want to bring trees with us in that system that is a bit broken, I would say, and because copyright is not about creating in common. It doesn't know how to do with creation in commons. Yes, if we create with 2 or 3 persons, it can work. But when you create in common, and when you consider that your creation is not only creation with a tree or with another co-author, a human co-author, but actually what you create is also dependent of everything that has been created before you. Copyright law doesn't do that. Again, it cuts that network, it cuts those relationships to make your creation into a separate thing that is attributable to you, and it gives you a really strong control of how that piece of culture can circulate, what it's its meaning, what people can do with it. And so I'm not really happy that the tree would go into that very dark place. And I would say that actually this giving rights to nature is actually not looking or obscuring the way property rights and copyright have been built across times, and how actually we would make the tree as a further device to transform creation into commodities, into objects. So actually, I don't say that it's not a good solution. I say that actually it creates a paradox that we should be careful about. It's the paradox is how, because giving rights to nature, giving copyright to trees, to nature, is also is a way to subvert the anthropomorphism of law. So this is what Joanna Gibson says. It's a subversion of this very anthropomorphic approach of law. But how we do that without reducing or getting rid of the alterity that is necessary, I think, and it's in the form of the non-humanity of nature. You know, the non-humanity of nature is also something that we want to care about. So I would go to the next quote, because I think that what interests me mostly is how we can subvert the law, and if we give rights to nature, how we do it, how we reimagine law as a way to organize relationship between humans, more than humans, non-humans, you know, and how do we look at law as giving a place to trees, to rivers, to human, to dogs in a society? How do we make us inhabitants of the same place, you know, and this notion of property as being inhabitants is a place, is a notion that I borrow from a friend, Sarah Van Uxem, who is a property lawyer, but also, and that goes to the other quote, this notion of kinship that comes also from Stratton, from Marilyn Stratton, from Ursula Le Guin, of course, and Joanna Gibson talks about it too, and from Donna Haraway. And so I will read that quote, because I think that should inspire us to maybe reinvent the law or reimagine the law, not in terms of rights, in terms of objects, subjects, things, but trying to think the law as some sort of relationship of organization of kinship. So kin making is making persons, not necessarily as individuals or as humans. I was moved in college by Shakespeare's punning between kin and kind. The kindest were not necessarily kin as family. Making kin and making kind as category, care, relatives without ties by birth, lateral relatives, lots of other echoes, stretch the imagination and can change the story. I think that the stretch and recomposition of kin are allowed by the fact that all earthlings are kin in the deepest sense, and it's past time to practice better care of kinds as assemblage, not species one at a time. Kin is an assembling sort of word.
Thank you, wonderful. Before we open up to questions, we have. No, I think it's nice to hear your voice in here, because you have been thinking a lot about this also.
Just because of the time.
Yeah, you're still here.
Okay. Thank you for your very straight to the point on rethinking of how law, or what are the problematics of the rights of nature, which is something that along the process of the research that I have been doing over the years on the rights of nature has always been there. Like, does nature need the rights? And this idea that the rights are only there for humans to control themselves in relation to the trees in the rivers. So yeah, I chose this sentence, and first I don't know why I chose this sentence, but I think I chose because this was the reason why I got so intrigued by the fact that corporations are able to have rights and rivers do not have rights. And that makes me also think, I like how you say that law can be performative and can bring also this element of fiction, and it can be also imaginary. And reading this, I will read first the sentence that is, real people are, of course, involved in these corporations. However, the law allows the people to invest in and run these artificial legal persons to structure them in such a way that they avoid criminal, financial, and moral responsibility for the actions which the corporations do not do on their behalf. The courts recognize the rights of participants in corporations to hide being the corporate veil, and are seldom prepared to look through the fiction that a company is a person, in order to hold those who pull the strings liable for acts done in the same name of the corporation. And again, this is Cormac Collinell that wrote the Wild Law, that was a manifesto of jurisprudence for law. And this idea of the fictionality of imagining that a corporation has this legal rights that is really attached to the people, it's in some way inspiring, because if we can imagine that this is possible in a corporation, we could also imagine that if we decide that we are the guardians of the river in European context, and even if we are afraid to say that we are indigenous from our own lands, if we are afraid to say that we can actually listen to the river, listen to the water, listen to the trees. We do not know to speak the same language because we do not speak the same language. That's a fact. But we can recognize our relationality with those entities that are our kin. And our kin and our ability to recognize them as a family has moved me throughout these years, because once I realized that water is my mother, then I could understand that every being that lives along the river is my kin. And for that, I will also pass to the next question that I have. Which one I press? I was undecided by these two questions, but I think one speaks to the other. And it is, I will also read them. When we remember the wildness that connects us with all life, we will belong again. When we experience our role within the earth community once more, we will be able to see that we cannot separate how we govern our societies from who we are. As indigenous people know, it is our laws and practice that makes us who we are as societies and as individuals. And this is again a way for us to remind us that once we remember the source practice, that is us being the vessels of the sacredness of our land, we will be able to tend to attend and to listen. And that's not a job of an activist. That is a job of someone who cares, someone who attends and sends the others as our family. And I think I would conclude now, because it is time, and I feel also the public might want to share something or question something.
Maybe first.
And yes, maybe we can hear some insights.
Yes, I.
Yeah.
It has been a lot, and I took some notes, and especially with Séve, which actually rose a good point, because I also, in the beginning, when I started to doubt, I had the same questions. Am I allowed to speak out? Is it true? I think it's important to stimulate, as that's my personal opinion, as much as possible other people also to awaken their senses, and there are many ways to receive information from natural entities. And I do experience that in many cases we can repeat the information that we receive, or we have the similar, we obtain the same information with different people. So that's it's a little bit of how do you call it, a definition, if you can use the term measurement. So measurements are for science, but there is a definition for science if it's you can repeat it and you can do it with other people without knowing from each other. Then there is it's accepted that it becomes a measurement. And so the dowsing still is in the gray area and all those forms of connection. But we also forgot that in the 19th century, those types of measurements were fully acknowledged at the time. And in the UK, when I was there, a lot of people can immediately relate to it. They say, "Ah, you're a dowser, you're a diviner," and they come with stories they can relate to in their immediate surrounding of other people doing this. So it's really a cultural thing. And when you started talking, Séverine, about the question either to give legal position to trees, rivers, and such. I thought that this is not the most important thing, that receiving love, respect, and recognition. So the relationship is the most important, but which you came upon later on with the kinship. And I think there is not so much to conclude with it or to add to this.
Okay. We have been talking a lot. You have been listening a lot. Are there any questions that you would like to ask, or comments that you would like to give, thoughts that you would like to share? No? Yeah. Is there? No, there's no microphone.
I can speak without that.
Okay.
Okay. Als we lukt in Engels, zou ik het in Nederlands zeggen.
Ja.
In alle twee? Ja. Misschien eerst iets waar ik niet helemaal mee akkoord ben. Dat een rivier een begin heeft. Dat zie ik niet zo. Ik denk dat je een rivier meer moet zien in het geheel van de waterbeweging die op de wereld is. En niet alleen als een entiteit. Het is wel goed dat je ze ziet en dat je ze graag ziet. Maar het is geen geheel op zich. Ten eerste er zijn heel veel bronnen. En ik denk dat elke druppel dat er valt ook een bron is van die rivier. En dan wou ik...
Sorry, do you want translation? Yeah. Okay. So, and because
maybe there's also other people.
Yeah. En dan geef ik u terug de stem, hè, maar ik ga even vertalen, want Lucia is Portugees.
Okay.
So the idea is that he doesn't agree with the fact that a river has a beginning and an ending. For him, a river is part of a whole water movement, which is global. And so a river is not an entity. Every drop of rain can be a source of a river.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. By the way. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I would say another thing of our proper relations to water. Then you can see in your whole body, you are consisting of 80, 80,
Yeah.
80% of water.
Yeah.
So then you can ask, where is the water coming from?
Mm.
Yeah, of course.
We are the river.
Mm.
It's true. We are all the elements are in us.
Yeah.
Ja, als we daar separaat gaan zien, dat is de problem.
Yeah, dankjewel.
Okay.
If no one has a question, then I might have a question. But you're sure?
Yes.
Ja, nog iets.
In het Nederlands.
Ja.
als dat mag.
Ja,
Ehm,
ik zal vertalen. Ja.
Is het de bedoeling om bijvoorbeeld een boom copyright te geven, om eventueel zijn rechten op die copyright nadien te verdedigen, mocht iemand daar misbruik van maken? In een rechtszaak bijvoorbeeld? Of is het symbolischer? Is het vanuit je hart dat je deelt met die boom je verhaal? Ah ja, dat...
Okay, so the question is whether it's whether it is the purpose to lend copyright to a tree, so that the tree can defend this right to these rights in court. Yeah, that's yeah.
Or if it is symbolic.
Or if it is symbolic. And it is about love and feelings. So I'll maybe answer first. For me, it is about the question in the first place. Philosophical, but also, and I chose the term author rights for trees as a kind of a provocation, because I quickly understood that for people it's kind of clear. Well, I come from a tradition, like with Constant, I have been for 15 years in a movement of Creative Commons, of open licenses, of collective work. And by the way, Séve is the translator of Creative Commons for Belgian law. So that's also how we met. So I don't believe in copyright as such. And I'm very interested in trying to imagine, and that's also, I think, why I asked the question to Séve and not to someone else, is how can we imagine this collectivity in terms of call it maybe not copyleft or call it a kind of condition, a work condition, and how to make sure that in this work condition, it's not only about the right, it's also about the negotiation. We collaborate. So how do we collaborate? How do I get the voice from the tree or the more than human? How do we do this? How do we communicate? How do we make meetings? How does the work comes to life? And then, of course, how do we credit and how do we remunerate or pay everyone involved in this? So the question is much larger, in my opinion. And I think that the bottom line is love and respect and feelings, because otherwise we wouldn't be asking these questions, I think. And also listening to Séve now, it's very clear that copyright, as it exists at this moment in European law, is a dead end, right? No, maybe.
Okay. You have finished? Okay. So yeah, but copyright is a lot of different things, and it's true that you use author's right, and in Belgium we use author's right and auteursrecht, because the English translation is copyright, but that was how it was called in England, in the US. And we use in France, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Germany, author's right to insist on the author. So copyright is true, it's creating a right of control over copies. So it's how the economy of copyright works, and the publishers, the producers, they make a living, there is a cultural industry, etc. But author's right is also, in copyright, is also about acknowledging that some person has created that work, and that for that reason, he's the person who can decide what can be done with the work. And this is some part of author's right that we like also, because it's important. It's about giving credit, so attribute the work to its source, be it a human being, a tree, or the two of them together. It's also about remuneration. It's important for the authors and for the artists. It's very important. It's declining, but it's very important. And so, but as you said at the beginning, if we give authors' right to a tree, does it mean that we can give a share of the money we make out of the creation to the tree, back to the tree, to make it live or to support it? So there are a lot of different things, and I don't mean that we have to throw copyright, and because there are very good things in copyright, and the fact to say that those entities have been at the source of that creation, that is something that enriches all of us. This is important. So when you told me I write under that tree, so I think that the tree has contributed to my writing. So this is why I want the tree to be co-author. For me, it resonated. I think it's important, and I know that your writing, that I will soon read, is not coming only from you, but it's coming from that tree, from the place where you said, or different things. So, and from all the authors and all the things that have also nourished you along the years. So, this is a question of what is the source of what we produce. And this is the good part of copyright. And I don't say that that making works into commodities, things that can be sold on the market, is a bad part, because it's also important to make money. So it's a bit complex.
Is dat een antwoord? Ja, wil jij nog iets toe?
Nee.
Ja.
I think
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Er is iemand, maar die zal later komen. Oké, zeg maar.
I think we have another problem, and it is that most of the Western people has lost their relationship with nature, and you cannot protect anything where you don't have a relationship with, that you don't see. And I think the first thing we have to do is bringing nature back to our community. And if we have nature back in our community, we will save it all without laws. We will fight for it. But now you see, nobody cares about nature. So that's I think something very interesting for artists to do, bringing nature back to culture and bringing that kind of culture back to our society, to our Western society.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think you have been doing very good work as well.
Yeah.
I've seen already a conference. I attended a conference where you spoke about your work. So thank you very much by bringing nature back to the city. Yeah. Karin.
It's difficult to listen and to think. So it's just an observation, because I felt like the four different voices are also different languages of the four of you. And that the beauty perhaps of this setting is to bring these languages into one scenery, but they're not necessarily, they're different. And perhaps what the predecessor was just saying is contributing to that people who live in nature or work with nature, they may not have a language, but they do something there is a deep connection one way or the other, that is not necessarily articulated, or that is part of languages that are offered to them without them finding their own language. So I was wondering if the issue is not one of language rather than or perhaps the question is that is it not the question of language as a representation that is a practice that can divide or connect us?
Yeah, thank you. And also very interesting because before we started tonight, I think I told you, no, like, are we not? I have the impression that we all have the same voice. So it's interesting to hear that you hear 4 different voices.
And languages.
And languages, yeah, voices and languages. And I don't know if you can extend a little on this, like what difference did, like, is it the wording? Is it like, do we need wordings that are more, do we need to be more specific on concepts, on, like the pagamento is a liberal word, like economic word, and I do agree that it can be replaced by reciprocity. Maybe guardianship is a word that can be cultivated a bit more. Maybe the kinship is a concept that we can start to use more. Talk about kin instead of talking about the animals around us. I don't know.
Well, for me, it's not a problem. I think it's the contrary. So for me, it's different languages, but it's, I know I don't know the others. So law is obvious, huh? and working on politics. So law is in itself is a concept in an established reality somewhere. But for me, it was more. It's in society we also have those kind of different languages, and perhaps what is needed is to it's difficult. I feel like to make the connection to people who may not sense or be on tune with a discussion like this, once these different languages are seen as different, they also open up spaces. They open up something which otherwise is unconnected.
Maybe I can relate to that because in this group, the Natural Contract Club, we are actually transdisciplinary. So from the very beginning, the aim was that we could bridge these languages between our co-creation, which was always a challenge because you have rights of nature hardcore lawyer that has a vision that a tree do not have a spirit and we cannot dialogue with the tree, but very aimful to recognize the river as a legal entity. Then you have restorative justice that is really focused on the idea that you do not punish a corporation because punishment is not a word that is used in restorative justice. You try to find a reconciliation, but how do you reconcile a corporation with a landscape? It's another dilemma that we will not be able to solve here today. And then you have ecological grief that brings the somehow possibility for us to collectively mourn, which is something that we are slowly learning how to do because we live in a society where landscapes are actually disappearing massively and we do not know where to put those emotions. And then we have the component of art that brings this sensitivity, like how can we deep sense who is there, even if you don't speak the same language, because we are already, in this transdisciplinary group, we are already having difficulties to understand each other's language and to create a process that we say that it could be another way of making multi-species justice. But is that the justice that the river wants? That's the other question. How does the river listens to our gesture that we say we are doing a gesture of reciprocal care for the river? So it's another language. And when people would say, yeah, we are representing the river, no, we are not representing the river. We are listening to the river. And wherever that form comes, we think it comes by vocabulary, by language, but no, because the river does not speak. So it's people are very focused on how do we represent. We don't represent. The river does not want to be represented. The river wants to be left alone, or be loved, or be cared. So in law, when we come to the thought, yeah, we are representing, we can be the representatives of the river in a court. Yes, we can, if we know the river, if we know who is there, and if we have stories with this river. So it's the languages are all there. It's even we before we breathe, we were inside our mother's womb, so we were not breathing. We first were inside water. So our body, like you were saying, we are bodies of water. Yes, we were born from water. We spent 9 months in water, and then we have the first breath. And once we became these earth beings, we lost it. We lost this idea that we come from water, and that's the messages that we can try to tap into. And maybe there is no need for language. Yeah, I don't know.
Everything okay?
Yeah. I just smiling. Oh, it's beautiful.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
an observation and a question.
Yeah.
First is my observation I like to share with people that I think will understand what I mean, because it's something that gave me a whiplash last year. I only last year discovered the highest point in Belgium, which is already a very low country, it's literally a parking lot. So people bring their car to the physically highest point of Belgium to take a staircase to see a view of the parking lot, I guess. So I'm sharing this. Incredible, and maybe a parking lot can be moved. And my second was something that was triggered by the previous quote that Maria, I think, shared about about the corporations and how corporations can hide behind the corporate veil. I don't understand, well, I know very little of it, but this sort of triggered me because law is rules, and then if you know rules, you can play with them.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, was there ever the thought exercise of using the logic of corporate law on nature in the same way that corporations hide behind entities to hide usually criminal activities and responsibility? It can be turned around and used to give the opposite, to give more power to a forest, a river, whichever entity you then end up with physically, literally taking to court. Like I don't know, I see this mirror parallel of this in nature as a positive thing, but I don't know if this thought exercise was ever done. Or where would it lead, or what? Is there a fun answer to this, or is it a boring answer?
But it's a very broad question. So actually, law is not about rules. That's the first thing. This is how we think of law, but actually, law is not about rules. But that's just another question. But yeah, corporations have received legal personality, but first to make them liable and accountable. So that was the beginning. So that was about giving them rights, but not rights against others, but rights to organize their existence, to have an existence that would also make them accountable, so they would have obligations. So that was the first thing. But it's true that, for instance, when we talk about rights, this is something that I wanted to say earlier, I don't remember when, but your question also triggers that. Today, in Europe, corporations have also fundamental rights. So they claim that they benefit from human rights, which is an extension. This is really, really strange. So they protect before courts their fundamental right to speech, their fundamental right to the protection of their property, the fundamental right, a lot of fundamental rights, access to information, etc., which is really, really strange because, you know, cooperation do not speak as such, and they are not human rights. So the human rights have been also created at the end of World War II to protect people against the atrocity that happened. So it's really strange. So this is also show. I'm sorry, I got lost a bit, but it shows that legal personality is not only about protection; it's about also gaining autonomy and getting power over others. So I wouldn't say that the trees, once they have rights, will act in the same way. But you know, it's a question. I don't know if that answer completely to your question because it was very broad, but
I don't know. It's not for now because we might sit here forever and I will be taking your brain. But it's not like I like to think that we can one day beat capitalism at its own game and then maybe evolve into a next form of society, I don't know, consensus, or however we decide to share this living that we have together.
yeah.
And then,
But actually, the law is an instrument also of capitalism. You know, so actually, this is a society and the economic order that actually create the law it needs for its own ends. So you know, there is a book that is called that says that law is the code of capital, and it's true of that capitalism as its way of devising law that it needs to prosper and to, you know, to. So if we live in another society, then we can make different laws. So this is why also, you know, the rights of nature and everything that is going on and this legal imagination is also very interesting because it seems it points at a different kind of society and ecology that would actually create a different legal regime for new ages where we would maybe protect the nature or go back to the nature or give more presence of the nature in our legal system. So that is also a good thing, but yeah.
If I just may, because I do strongly feel, and I just checked if it was my personal thing, but it's agreed upon by the network that it's important to raise also the importance that we don't know our proper past, and how can we evolve and learn if we don't know our true history, her story and history together. So our past, and it's so important for all of us, women and men, to know it. And last decades, many really important archaeological findings are being made. Theories are being formed. Maria Gimbutas has been restored and everything. So there's a lot of things moving, but it's not flowing the mainstream media. So it's not integrated in the schooling system, in the education. So it's very difficult now to well, if you want, you can find it. And more people like myself are doing this work. But I think it's really an invitation for all of us, for society now, for all people. So go and check out our history, because only then you can look at a broader level and well, have some new ideas perhaps as well.
Maybe trees can help us with that.
Yes.
And rivers. I'm looking at the time. We have a last slide, unless there is an urgent question. Yeah, but we have a last slide, and it's a message that Aelyn got this morning from the tree fields, So you want to?
I will read it, and oops. I think it's also a beautiful demonstration that networks and energy do link up, because I did not know anything of what the others would tell tonight. And I think it's a beautiful recapitulation. So speaking from the global network of trees, thank you, Anne and all, for inviting us, for listening to our voice, our true voice. Many spheres are observing this with great joy. Know that we are here to support the ones who truly want to hear us. Know that we have been waiting for millennia for you to awake and take up once again this role. Know the earth is your home. Do not fear to live. But the earth is your mother as well, and all creatures are thus your brothers and sisters. Treat them with respect and love so they can recognize you as kin. We trees link heaven and earth, and we help you to remember you are able to do just the same.
Thank you very much. And we can speak in the cafe if you want.